Plant fans, plant fans, plant fans. How do we use the colour blue in our gardens to best effect? It's been my day job to devise planting schemes for people for 4 or 5 years now. This is anecdotal, but blue would seem to be the most popular flower colour, or certainly I get requests for blue flowers a lot in planting schemes. Did you also know that bees have an innate preference for the colour blue? Also for yellow, but they will travel to the blue flowers first. When we're talking about using blue in our gardens, I'm mainly talking about perennials, as in flowers on perennials. I'm occasionally talking about flowers on shrubs. But something to know about pastels in general and blue in particular is there is something you can do with them that will help your garden to appear larger than what it actually is. So I think that's quite a useful thing. So most of you probably know about the colour wheel, but that might be an assumption. I don't know, because I didn't get exposed to the colour wheel until horticultural college, aged about 40. But my daughter was actually taught the colour wheel at primary school in about year 3 or year 4 or something like that. So that would be like age 9, 10, which shocks me actually, because for the main portion of my life I didn't know anything about the colour wheel. Anyway, just in case you don't know, colour wheel is a very useful tool which sets out the colours in an array, which just makes very clear what are the complementary colours and what are the harmonious colours. Similarly, you can also take away from it the colours that will clash, and that won't look so good together. So the opposite and complementary colour for blue is orange. When I was a child, it was a common sight to see peaches being sold with blue tissue paper behind them. Obviously, the greengrocers had some foresight there into realising that the blue would offset the peach colour really nicely, make it look appetising, etc., and sell more fruit. It doesn't seem to happen so much these days, but I definitely remember that from my childhood. Moreover, this colour theory has been going back a long time, even as far as Aristotle and his students in ancient Greece, if you can believe, with multiple pivotal texts being published between then and now. So this stuff is not new. I'm sure you'll recognise this painting as well. This is the self-portrait of Vincent van Gogh, or Vincent van Gogh. This painting is actually from 1888, if that puts some context on the history of it for you. The correct way, apparently the Dutch way to pronounce that name, is Vincent van Gogh. But notice on the colours, they're actually more vivid than real life. And Vincent van Gogh here is leveraging the interplay between blue and orange. Suffice to say, his beard wasn't actually that ginger in real life. Lol. That is the first way to really use blue well in your garden. Team it up with some orange. You may be interested to know that cobalt blue is considered to be the primary blue. Like the purest blue is cobalt blue, shown here for you. In this book, The Colour Eye, this was published in 1990, and in here it states that blue is always a cool colour. However, if you research now, you will find that it's accepted that there are warm hues of blue as well. So we move on to the little trick with blue. In colour theory, red will appear to advance towards the viewer, and blue will appear to recede away from the viewer. But it's not as simple as that, because dark blues will actually appear to advance towards the viewer. In fact, it's only pale blues that will appear to recede away from the onlooker. Well, why is this? Well, on misty mornings, you get the mountains, and they will often appear to take on a blue hue in the distance if they're a few miles away. What's actually happening there is there are particles in the atmosphere that will distort the colour and make it take on a blue hue. So blue becomes associated with distance, on top of which obviously the sky is blue, and that has a feeling of depth, feeling of eternity. So how do we wrap all this together and actually use the fact that this pale blue is receding? Well, if you are to plant pale blue flowers at the very back of your garden, then they will appear to recede away from the viewer, and that will actually create the impression that the garden is bigger than it actually is. That's a nice little visual trick you can use, particularly if you've got a small garden. Anyone who's done their plants homework knows that it's not enough just to plant blue flowers. You need to plant them in the right conditions, which is why I'm showing you here some blues that are suitable for full sun. blues that will tolerate some shade. We've got blues that like it wet, which is the bog sage here, this salvia. That one really needs to keep its feet wet and not dry out. Equally, we've got some blues here for dry conditions. If only it was that simple. We know that flowers come and go, so we need to have some kind of succession plan in place as well. We've got some blue throughout the seasons here that can take you throughout the year. We have some blues for early spring, which are bulb form normally. Blues for late spring, when the garden is exploding into life. Blues for early summer. Blues for late summer, which quite often go into autumn.
Just note that a few of these ones are tender. The Plumbago auriculata, the climbing one, and the salvia can be taken into next year by cuttings, and the morning glory would need to be through seed collection. But I am in love with Plumbago, so I think it's worth it.
And I couldn't really think of any blues for winter. I don't think there are any.
But if you can think of any, then do mention them in the comments below.
If you're curious, this particular shade of orange is known as goldfish and its hex code FF9913. And if you're wondering what other visual strategies you can use in your garden, little tricks and tips, then watch this short tutorial on using lines in the planting in your garden, because that will get you places as well.
And a big thank you to Mona Abood for the kind use of her garden for this video.